Hey everybody, it's CA Baker. I'm back with another author interview, and this time I'm with Azah Davis, fantasy author, and she's here to tell us a little bit about herself and her books and everything that she's working on and excited about. So I'll go ahead and get into the questions. So the first one, we just want to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and help readers get to know you a bit.
Sure. My name is Azah Davis, and I've been writing for about 2 years now. My first book was published in 2018, and it was an urban fantasy novel. So contemporary fantasy, very much looking like the world that we're familiar with, but with the magical element.
Mhm.
And it was about demon hunters. And it's just a really fun action-packed book, and it was just a great intro to come out into the writing community and to get people to know my stories and my style of writing.
Okay, very good. So let's see. So, what made you want to become an author? What was that? Everybody has their little background stories as to what kind of fuels us into this because it's not an easy thing to do. And, it's one of those things that something has to be motivating you, something has to click for you in order to really push you to keep writing and get published.
Absolutely. So I actually did not always love to read and write. A lot of people will say, that they were writing since they can hold a pen or a crayon. But in my case, I just came from a big family and was very much about just playing and interacting with others. And I just had a little bit of trouble with reading growing up. And that was something that my mom really helped me to overcome, just always taking us to the public library and making sure that she acted on the teacher's recommendations. So I was always good in school and able to kind of focus and get through it, even though reading and writing weren't my favorite subjects. And then it wasn't until I was about 14 as a freshman in high school that during my English class, we took a trip to the library within the school. And we were told that we had to pick a book before the end of class, and we can go. And so I'm bored, I'm annoyed, I'm going through the aisles, and I've always been an artist and just really interested in sketching, drawing, using paints, color pencils, whatever I could get my hand, watercolor. And so it was really amazing for me to just stumble across this fairy tale fantasy cover of a book. It was like an Irish fairy tale. And I just was very taken away by the stunning cover. And it wasn't like flashy with like all these colors, but it was just moody in a way.
Okay.
And the book is called Daughter of the Forest. And it just stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, because of the cover, I turned it over and read the back, and I was like, sounds good. And it was based on this fairy tale about an evil sorceress who turns a group of a family into geese, and
Hmm.
how one person in that family who manages to escape that curse is now has to go into this horrible trial of creating sweaters out of thorns
Oh,
to
wow.
the only way to break the curse to turn her family members back into humans. And it is just so it's a beautiful story based on a simple little fairy tale, and it was just
Hmm.
so beautifully done as like a YA Irish fantasy, and it just
Cool.
really inspired me to want to read and write. And I just kept reading and reading, and my
Mhm.
writing got better and better to the point where I ended up in like high level English classes by the time I was graduating high school. So it was one of those where like I didn't seek it out, but I just saw how much reading helped me write and express myself. And I've always been artistic. And so writing was just another way of being able to share the characters that I was, imagining in my head. And whether it was, something more of a creature, something more of like a beautiful woman in a fashion dress or something. So I've been in love
Yeah.
with writing ever since.
Wow. Yeah. And me also being a professor and I teach English and writing, it's so fascinating every time. And I know it works, but every time I hear someone say that the more they read, the better they are at writing and vice versa. And it just
Mhm.
kind of plays on each other. And it's interesting. Like I keep telling my students, you should read more, but they're like, I don't really like to. And I'm like, just find something you like, a magazine or something.
Mhm.
And it really does help. I mean, it pushes you to want to write like that, and the style kind of gets in your subconscious. So that's great. So you found that fantasy, I guess it was a YA fantasy
Mhm.
book, and that really kind of sparked your imagination. And you probably did you end up devouring like just tons of other books in that
Oh,
genre or other
absolutely.
genres?
I've read so many things by that one author, and then yep, and then I as springboard for others. And I used to move around a lot, so I was more of
Mhm.
a borrowing from the library type of person than buying books that I didn't have any place for. Um, and so, yeah, just always, back at my library, checking out new books, especially if anything new came out by that author.
That's awesome. So what made you bridge that gap from avid reader and, playing around with characters and writing to really wanting to get published? Like
Mhm.
what was the push for that?
Sure. So so I was writing all these stories. A little bit was fan fiction, a little bit was original, and just doing it as a hobby for a while. And I would share it with friends and family, and they would just devour it, like, oh, send me more. I want to know more. How does this end? And my only problem, as most inexperienced writers have, is that I had all these brilliant ideas, but then I'd kind of like flounder somewhere in the middle and not end up finishing a story, just because of not thinking out the plot all the way through, that sort of thing.
I've been there too.
Right. So that's where I kind of got stuck a little bit. But um, after working in I went to school, to college, and studied social work, because my whole family is come from nurses and health aides and just people who help others. And so social work was a good fit for me. I love the therapy aspect, and I was so sure I was going to continue on and end up becoming a therapist. But I ended up always having this passion to write in the background. And I was so discouraged by the amount of student loans I would be incurring as I continued on in my career. And just like teachers and a couple of other professions, social workers, for the amount of debt that you acquire, the salaries don't always match up. And so it's one of those things where you have to love it, and you have to be okay knowing, okay, I may not make six figures one day, but I feel like, it's my calling, it's my purpose. And I was there, but moving up from New York to New Hampshire, I ended up working in the healthcare field, but not in the social work. And I felt like I ended up in one of those passionless jobs where I was very qualified to do what I was doing. My coworkers loved me, but I felt like I could be replaced. Like I was like a cog in the wheel, and I just knew that I had other talents that I wasn't using, and I wanted to turn some of my hobbies and my passions into careers. So that really motivated me to see how can I write and somehow make that into a source of income for me that might one day replace what I was making full time. And
Yeah.
yeah, being a young mother at the same time, that was one of the reasons why I hesitated to go the traditional route. I was worried about being on other people's schedules and deadlines, knowing that I wanted to be a stay-at-home parent or like the primary caregiver for my children. I knew that that would be really tricky to do both at the same time. And so I figured if I were to, you know, create my own professional team of designers and editors, that I could get my work out there, learn as I went along, and grow, and at the same time be able to just work on at my own pace. And that's exactly what I've been doing ever since.
Great. All right. Well, we're going to go to the next question. Let's see. We have, so what kinds of stories or books do you write and why? So you touched a little bit onto it, but kind of go into, I guess, the specific subgenre that you write in or subgenres if you write in multiple, and just why you chose those.
Yes. Um, so I've always loved fiction more than nonfiction books, and didn't really feel like in my young age I had as much expertise to go into nonfiction. And so I just wanted to tell stories, and I wanted to entertain and to inspire. So those are always the two words that are at the top of the forefront of my mind when I'm writing, to make sure that everything I write is entertaining and that it somehow allows people to have that bit of escapism that, is so fun about reading fantasy, and also to have something in there that is inspiring, some kind of kernel of like truth or like light or hope, something a little bit uplifting. So I personally don't write like dark fantasy or grim dark or like just like straight horror. I just have those elements. Maybe I'll play with them in my stories. I do write adult fiction, but I like for people to kind of feel like maybe the world isn't such a bad place, by the time they're done. If not with my story, but at least the series.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, well, some people aren't so good, but eventually we'll get there and it'll be good.
So those are the kind of thoughts that go through my mind as I'm writing my fantasy stories. The two subgenres that I prefer to read and write in are urban fantasy, which is like contemporary fantasy novels, and I also really like paranormal romance. So I haven't published a paranormal romance novel yet, but I have a lot of those in the works. So doing some development behind the scenes, and I already have 2 books out with my urban fantasy series, and the third one comes out a little bit later, in early May.
Awesome.
Yeah, so this one
Um,
is
yeah, and a lot of people, if they're not a fantasy writer themselves or a fantasy reader, they might kind of downplay fantasy, but just most of the stories that are fiction that like matter a whole lot to our culture and things like that, they usually have some sort of fantasy tie to them. I mean, especially nowadays with all the movies being made with stuff. So that's actually one of the courses that I teach is fantasy. So it really is a genre that is kind of embedded in our psyche as human beings. So it's pretty cool. Our next question is, what do you think is your main strength with writing? Like what part of writing do you feel like you've just got to really get a handle on and really bring it to your writing for your readers to enjoy?
Mhm. Um, I was just talking to someone else who's an aspiring writer, developing his first series, and it's so big. This friend of mine, his ideas, and I'm helping him just kind of develop some kind of focus, just to help him have a few places to start. And we were talking about, where to start when you have a big story, and where do you like what parts of the story do you enjoy writing the most? And I was able to tell him I really like writing dialogue. Like it's the part that I can imagine when I'm washing dishes or I'm in the shower. I could just kind of easily, kind of like a little commercial or like a little scene from a movie, see 2 characters interacting, and that intense dialogue between them. And I'm always like, oh, I gotta remember that. Oh, I gotta remember that. I want them to say exactly that in my book, and
That's going to be hard to remember, especially if like it comes to you all of a sudden and then, you got to find a way to write it down or capture it real quick.
yeah, and I'm not one to like always have a notebook with me. So luckily, we all have cell phones nowadays that have some kind of note track, apps on there to keep track of ideas. So I end up
Yeah.
using that a lot. Yeah, so I start with I usually start a lot with developing my main characters and their bios and their motivations, their flaws. And then when I'm actually doing my rough draft, it starts with dialogue. And I feel like that's really strong. And I think it's because I really have this passion to write authentically. And so I really do think about interactions I've had or stories that I've heard as a social worker studying to be a therapist. And just, or even being someone who lived in New York, you know, you're riding public transportation a lot. So sometimes I might be at dinner with my husband and a waiter will say something in a really colorful way. And I'm like, oh, you know, I never would have thought about saying it just that way. That's really cute. I'm going to keep that, you know, and write that in one of my books or something like that. So I hope that when people are reading my stories, as fantasy, you know, themed as it is, that the actual characters seem like people that you might have, you know, that you might know. They seem a little familiar to you, in the sense that there's some realism, some authenticity with them.
Yeah, and like people watching is so important. Like if you don't know what people do, like if they're nervous, like chewing their nails or, you know, the little things that you observe people doing or hear them saying, I mean, all that's character, you know. So that's great. Also, so our next question, why was going indie a good fit for you? So you touched on it a little bit, but you know, what was the deciding factor and why does it work for you versus trad? Because I mean, there's nothing wrong with going trad or indie. It's just, it's going to be what fits for you.
So to be honest, my ultimate goal, just out of curiosity really, is to really see both sides of the fence and to truly know for myself which side is greener than the other. So I do still plan on querying and one day getting one of my stories traditionally published, and really for myself, seeing which side speaks to me more. Right now, I'm a young mother. I have two kids. One is 3 months and the other is 2 years. And
Wow.
so, yeah, so, you know, throughout normal, you know, everyone else's normal work day, I'm a stay-at-home mom and I'm devoted to them. And so the time that I have to write is really in the evenings when I've taken care of business and everyone else is safe, you know, well-fed, cleaned, and
I definitely feel you there.
off to La La Land. So that doesn't leave a lot of time, maybe between like 10 and midnight and 2 some nights, for me to even get started to write. So it's funny that I've been a writer or a published author for about 2 years now, and I'm doing part-time hours, really, you know, even though it's a career that I'm developing and I don't consider it a hobby. So it's, it's really funny. And so knowing those were my limitations, that my number one priority was my family, my young children, and that I would have so much limited time to write, to edit, and to be even responsive during the day to like emails and calls from people needing input from me to move forward with the products that I would be developing. I knew that I needed to have more control and that I needed to really set the pace for myself. And I wanted to keep enjoying it. I didn't want to be on someone else's timeline and schedule and to feel like I was falling short just because I couldn't keep up with a schedule that didn't fit me. So I think that was my number one concern with not going traditionally published right out of the gate. I also figured, why not develop my audience base and really develop my brand and my own storytelling style through writing. And whether someone publishes a book or not, I really do tell friends that I have that are still in that pre-published state that the most you're ever going to learn from writing is going to come from actually doing it. Like, you know, like you have to write the essay, the thesis, the novel. And even if that one work never gets published, you're going to learn so much more from doing it and polishing it than you ever would simply from taking an online course or
Oh, definitely.
reading, articles or books about it. Like there's something about the experience of going through it. And I've seen that even with my second book, that I've had reviewers tell me that as much as they loved my first book, they've already seen a jump in terms of my storytelling and the way that I'm able to pull them along and weave
Oh,
that
yeah.
story. And it's so flattering and validating to hear that my writing's only getting stronger with each novel.
You can't really judge an author by their debut novel because having just released my first novel, my debut novel, I know I learned so much, and I catch myself at times going, should I go back and fix that? And I'm just like, no, I need to leave it, and I need to focus on the second book, and I need to get that going. And just show my readers that I can improve book after book after book. And, but it's so tempting, to try to go back and fix those things that you learn through that process. There's really no other way to learn it. So
Right.
that's
And
great.
before you have that first book, you're so afraid of making mistakes and you're so afraid of it not being perfect. And no matter how much time or money you put into it, like you said, you're gonna develop and then look back and be like, okay, these are my newbie mistakes, or not
Yeah.
even mistakes sometimes, but just, having gotten stronger skill wise, you wouldn't have made some of those choices with your earlier books.
Or you
And
would have polished it a little more or
yeah,
something.
yeah. And you realize it's okay, right? That the stronger you get as a storyteller, the least you're gonna, your love for your first book is gonna dwindle a little bit over time,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's see. Our next question is, what are your current books? And briefly, what are they about? So just kind of pitch them to us, let readers know if they might be interested, kind of what they're getting into if they pick them up.
Sure. So my first series is called Nadira Holden Demon Hunter, and this book series is about a 20-something-year-old African American female who is a part of a covert society of demon hunters in a world that is blissfully ignorant of what's going on around them. And so she's doing all these acts of heroism and protecting people to keep their everyday lives normal. And at the beginning of the story, it actually is her waking up to realize that there's been 20 years since she last remembers. And the world is very different from how she left it. She was in the middle of a battle, and the demon hunters were, heroically sacrificing themselves, and she made that sacrifice. And in this new world that she wakes up into, demons and humans are walking around, mingling, everything's cool. And it turns out that demons have shared their understanding of magic with humans, and that makes us as humans love them like celebrities. They're
Oh boy.
beautiful, mystical creatures that we don't quite understand, but they've given us, in mythology, the gift of fire. They've given us, the gift
Oh,
of,
yeah.
and they can do no wrong in our eyes. But having not had that 20 years of getting acclimated to it, she has, the main character has her suspicions, and she can kind of see that, there's something happening behind the curtain. And as things start to hit the fan, her past organization asks her, hey, Nadira, we need you. We need you to save the world again. And she's kind of like, I just died for you guys. Maybe not. Maybe I've had my moment, and it's like someone else's turn to throw it all away and to live their lives. And so, and that's just the beginning of the story. And so it takes place. So we're following this hero who's already made a big sacrifice, and she just kind of wants to be at peace, but the world is so different, and she can see that they're being led down a path where humans are about to lose their rights and lose the beauty of the world that is today. And so we see her really grapple with leadership and stepping forward as a hero, a very reluctant hero, and just her having a lot of trouble adjusting to the way things are, with demons being in control and so powerful. So she's living in a world where demon hunting is actually outlawed, and that was her identity. And so
Yeah.
I feel like it just brings a lot of thoughts, you know, that readers will have about you know, who you think you are versus how life turned out and how you are now, and grappling with that. You know, you grew up thinking you were going to be a doctor, but, you know, maybe not so much. And, you know, and just what that's like. And there's just a lot of fun in terms of friendship and drama and even a little bit of simmering romance happening. And there's plenty of twists and turns for the people who devour fantasy novels and think they know what's going to happen next. So
I think you know.
exactly, are pleasantly surprised as we get through the book, and you know, new twists and turns keep popping up. And so I've got 2 books in that series, and the third.
Oh, hold them up.
Sure. So this is the first one, Nadira Holden, Demon Hunter, and
Beautiful covers, by the way.
thank you. It's called This Time, and then the second one is called That Night. Sorry, I don't know. Clear. Yeah, there we go. And the third book, These Moments, is coming out in just a little bit, and these aren't like the most traditional of fantasy book titles, but as you're reading the stories, really time and certain key moments really being pivotal in someone's life really plays a big role in the stories that I write. And so the titles start to make sense as you read along. And so These Moments is kind of the dramatic ending to this trilogy, but I've definitely created a big world where there can absolutely be more stories that follow other characters, or maybe even we see Nadira with another time jump, you know, like another 10 years down the road, something like that. I'm so excited for people to take a chance on me as a new author, and to you know, for those who are following me, to go ahead and devour the third book when it comes out in May.
Great. And that leads us right into what's your current MC and what she likes. So we know her name is Nadira and that she's a demon hunter. But what's her personality like? What kind of person is she?
Yeah. Okay. So she is not like snarky, sassy. She's not nerdy, and she's not ditzy either, right? And so she really is someone who is down to earth, level headed, a little bit guarded, having been grown up into this like small elite family, you know, of, you know, we are protectors of mankind. And so she's used to seeing herself apart from everyday humans, you know, me and you. And she never really desired to be a part of the everyday world or want a normal life. But then by the time we get to book 2, that's kind of where she's stuck, being that her profession is outlawed. And so it's really fun to see someone who is kind of a kick-ass, you know, action, you know, demon fighter, slayer character, have to like get a day job.
Yeah.
And
like, what do you do when your skills are like disemboweling creatures and stuff? You know?
Right. And she's like, okay, you know, I've got a cell phone, but when I was alive 20 years ago, we didn't have cell phones, and I've got to, hop on the bus and exactly, figure out this day job and worry about bills. And it's not what the whole book is about, but it's just really fun to see such a kind of iconic type of character kind of just thrust into a little bit of the mundane, and how she flounders with that for a little bit. Yeah, so again, pretty relatable, pretty confident, and she's someone who kind of is a bit hasty. So she is so confident that she'll kind of act and then have to think about what
react.
she said, and eat her words or apologize later. But she's kind of that person where I'll rather beg forgiveness than ask permission.
She'll just forge ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And she's one of those people who doesn't care about everything. She doesn't care about many, but the few people that she does know and care about, she'll go to the ends of the earth for. And so we start to see who warms their way into her heart, being that she is guarded. And it's really nice to see, her form friendships as the series goes on.
Great. She sounds fascinating as a main character. So our next question is, what work in progress projects do you currently have going on? So what's in the works?
Sure. So I started out with my urban fantasy series, and it was, if anyone hasn't guessed, a little bit inspired by growing up watching like Dawson's Creek and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I'm all about the drama and about the teen slayer, right? The teen chosen one who saves the world, and just putting my own twist on that. And part of that, and part of the reason why I write, I've seen this quote floating around the web all over the place, and it really speaks to me. It was basically a quote that says, if you, something I'm paraphrasing now, but if you aren't able to find the stories that you want to read, then maybe you should write them. It's kind of like that, like challenge, that suggestion that, throw your voice into the mix, throw out the kind of people or situations that you want to represent. And so all of my stories follow people of color, and that's just something that is near and dear to my heart. I love fantasy, love sci-fi, and before I was writing, I'm just like watching all the movies, and
Yeah.
I still love them to this day, but it is a little disheartening sometimes when you just don't see yourself represented among the main cast, or it's just it's always the side character that dies off pretty quickly versus being like the main star.
Yeah.
And obviously that's changing every day, every year. We're seeing more and more inclusion and just diversity in terms of cast. And that's exciting. But yeah, growing up, I just really wish that there were more African American fictional characters like in sci-fi, because they were pushing the envelope in so many other ways. That was just one element that was just kind of missing a bit. So I really feel passionately about being like, I don't need the most unique, out of the box plot. I really want to give people the stories that they want to read, and to just maybe add some characters that they can really relate to. And it'll just make them love the genre even more. And so I feel like that's been at the core of me as a writer and in all the stories I'm creating. So I've got my Demon Hunter series, which is a nod to Buffy and to the character Kendra, who was like the African-American slayer who was in a few episodes on that show. She really was a source of inspiration for me. And then the newest stories that I have, they're actually based on not werewolves necessarily, but shifters. So people who have two forms, one being a wolf, one being human. And so that's my foray into paranormal romance. Humans learning about shifters and those two worlds colliding. And so I've got a series out or in development, and it's called Forest of Fangs and Claws. And so it's going to be kind of timeless. It's not as contemporary as my current series is. And so you won't be able to exactly pinpoint, oh, this is the year and this is the city and this is exactly what's going on. So a little bit less familiar, more deep into fantasy. But it's going to be all about humans or falling in love with werewolves, or different people who can transform into wolves falling in love with each other, and all those fun and intense rules that go along with this new world, this new society that I'm creating.
Awesome. Yeah, both of those sound really interesting, especially like, is the, let's see, is the next book for the Demon Hunter series, is that the last book in the series?
Yes.
Or that one is?
Yeah.
Okay. So you'll have all of those
Yeah.
together, and then you'll have that new kind of shifter type of story coming out soon.
Yeah,
Very
and those
cool.
will be later in the year, and
Okay.
I'm going to try my hand at rapid releasing.
Okay.
For this book, being it first time indie author, they came out roughly every 6 months, every 9 months apart,
Hmm.
and so people were getting closer to that traditional, one book a year model. And so I
Yeah.
will see how people take to me creating stories that are a little bit funner, like a little bit lighter, um,
Hmm.
and they're going to be able to get installments a little bit quicker.
Okay. That sounds great. Our next question is, as an author, what are your plans for the future? So we know some of your current like work in progress stuff, but where do you see yourself, 5 years down the road or something?
Yeah, I would love to have 2 or 3 book series going, ongoing, and to have maybe 4, 5, 6 novels under my belt, um, and at different lengths. So my first series, they're all novels, full length novels, and I think with the Forest of Fangs and Claws, and the idea of it being a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun, paranormal romance, that those are going to be a little bit shorter. So I might even go the novella route. And so I think it's going to be really fun for me to play around with shorter stories, and maybe even longer series, and to really have 2 different types of genres and series going that people can kind of pick and choose from. But I do think I'll stick to fantasy. And I just really hope that I'm discovered by more and more readers. And I absolutely love being a part of the writing community that is on Facebook and Twitter. And I've made so many amazing connections with other writers. And it's pretty inspiring how much other writers want to help you. And
Yeah.
or want to collaborate like we're in this together, you help me, I help you, like what can we do to collaborate, what can we do to push each other forward, um,
Yeah.
and I found so much more collaboration than competition, and it's beautiful, and so it's only inspired me to want to give back, as I go further along and gain successes here and there, to share what I've learned and to collaborate with others that want to work with me. So I would love to see more of that in the future. And I think, like I said in the beginning, it might be nice to one day turn into a hybrid author, having
Yeah.
indie books and traditionally published books, and seeing for myself which is my true preference.
Yeah, and there's really no limit. Like people think you have to be locked into the indie box or locked into the trad box, and there's really no box. So, I mean, it's really up to you who you submit your work to. Your work is your work. And just if you want it to be in these people's hands and have them take care of it, and push it through the trad route, that's fine. Or if you want to have your own team and you do the pushing, that's fine too. So that sounds great. And that leads us straight into the next question. So what are your services that help out other authors? I saw on your website that you had some things that you do to try to help other up and coming authors, or maybe writers that haven't hit publish yet, and they're working on their stories.
Yes, and I just activated that part of my website this year when I was back in November, December, and really developing my author plan for the next year. It was really looking back at, again, just how much help I've received along the way behind the scenes, and some of it without asking. Some opportunities just kind of fell into my lap, and wanting to publicly encourage others to seek help or advice from me. And it's definitely something charitable. So I do it as much as I can, given the limited amount of free time I have. So I know how difficult it is when you've got a story and you know it's not perfect, it's not right, but you just don't know even where to begin to fix it. So that's where I come in as a beta reader. If people are writing in genres that I prefer, which is mainly fantasy and romance, or fantasy romance. And so if people are writing stories like that and they want just someone else who's read a lot of books and written a few to take a look at it and give them some pointers on how to clean up their stories before they ever hit publish, I'm your girl. And then same thing, if you've already published your book and you realize, wow, getting reviews is way harder than I thought. And it's so funny how I've read hundreds and hundreds of books and I rarely wrote reviews. Also, these were traditionally published books, so the reviews were there. And so having stepped into the indie world, less reviews all around. And I'm just realizing that the amount of people who are buying and reading my book does not translate well in terms of book reviews. And so you're like, wow, that's something else on top of marketing and just getting into new audiences, that you have to push, give me some feedback. So I am happy to read and review books for other authors. With that, I'm a little bit more cautious in terms of picking the kind of stories that I think I'll like, because I want to enjoy reading that book, and I would like to leave a positive review. And so whether I love or hate the book, I'm really careful to leave something constructive about it. So I don't just say I love it, I say why, and if I don't love it, I kind of say what were some rough gems, that are in there and that can be developed further. So either way, someone has something to work with to push their writing forward. And so, I've been doing that this year and it's been fun.
Great. Yeah. And that's the thing, is like the community of authors is very supportive in that way. And I've actually met several authors that actually beta read for me. I think I had 2 others that I met on Instagram, and, having their feedback was like invaluable. It's not quite the same as someone who's purely a reader, but they help in explaining some of those things that need to get fixed in a way that a writer understands. Like that's really helpful, to have another writer kind of have that perspective. And then you have others that maybe are purely readers kind of mesh the two. So that really helps. And so that brings us to our final question. And that is, where can everyone find you and your books?
Yes. So I am currently on Amazon and in Kindle Unlimited, and it is just the best way for me to have my books available to as many people as possible, while being able to manage all that on the back end. And I'm seeing a huge increase recently in reading happening on Kindle Unlimited, especially with the uncertain times we're living in these days. And so I'm really happy that people have multiple ways to access my stories. They're also available in paperback. And when I do in-person book readings, I'm able to sign them or mail them to fans here and there. So I really hope that people go ahead and visit my page on Amazon. I do have a personal website where I I list my services for other writers. I have a blog where I just show little glimpses of my writing process, and even my life as like a new mom, new writer. How do you manage the two? And every once in a while, I'll have guest posts or even spotlights on other authors that I think my readers might enjoy. And so that is azadavis.com.
Okay, very good. So that's with 3 A's. So AZ Davis.com. And are you on any social platforms like Instagram, Twitter? Can they find you there?
Yes. Thank you for asking. Over time, I've just added one more and tried my best to learn them. And so, yep, I have a Facebook author page, and that's just at Azah Davis. And same thing for Twitter. And then with
Okay.
Instagram, that's azah.davis.
Okay.
Yep, and my website kind of clearly shows all the other ways that you can find me online. I will admit that I spend the most amount of time on Facebook. That's just the platform I'm pretty familiar with. And so, yep, I would love it for people to come and visit my Facebook author page. I even have fun contests or giveaways every once in a while.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Azah, for joining me and doing this interview. It's been great learning about you and your books and your process and where you're going with being an author. Is there anything else you'd like to say, or point them in the direction of something exciting that you've got going on?
I just want to say thank you so much for showing an interest in me and my stories. And I really hope you go ahead and take a look at Nadira Holden, Demon Hunter, and get excited about her saving us all from beautiful demons. And that the third book in that series, These Moments, is coming out in May of this year. So just right around the corner. And it's already available on pre-order.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll have to put all of that stuff down below. So in the description, you'll see the links for her social media and website. You'll also see the links for the books on Amazon, as well as the pre-order for the new book that's coming out. So thanks again, Azah, and I'll go ahead and close this out.
Okay, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.